Good morning. If you take your seats, we'll get started. This will be our September Board of Regents meeting, and as a reminder, we are being streamed live over the internet, so members and those who may be present, please remember to use your microphones so that the web audience can hear you. I also ask that everyone please silence their cell phones. Keep them away from the microphones so there's no feedback. This month we have a meeting of the Louisiana Tuition Trust Authority. Commissioner Reed, will you please call your committee to order?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, call to order, and Dr. Boutte, will you call the roll?
I will.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Carolyn Blanchard will call the roll, and then Dr. Boutte will take it away.
Thank you. Dr. Reed.
Here.
Regent Adley. Regent Chabert.
Here.
Regent Ewing.
Here.
Regent Kinney. Regent Levy.
Here.
Regent Lipsey.
Here.
Regent Markle.
Here.
Regent McDonald.
Here.
Regent Meyer. Miss Mirza.
I think it's going to be more.
Regent Perez.
Here.
Regent Pryor. Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Temple.
He's here.
Regent Tennyson.
Here.
Regent Wyatt. Mr. Williams. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Carolyn. Dr. Boutte.
Okay. The first item up is approval of the minutes.
First item is approval of the minutes.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? So
Second.
moved and seconded. Any opposition? That's passed.
The second item is a consent agenda item, and this is to approve final rulemaking to amend the Start Saving Program Administrative Rules and the Louisiana ABLE Program Administrative Rules. Members, at your March 21st meeting, you authorized notice of intent for publication of these rules. In short, these are to implement the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that allows Start account owners to roll over funds to an ABLE account. It also applies the interest rates to the principal protection and to the earnings enhancements. It establishes those, and those must be established in rule. And it also allows ABLE account owners to have juridical entities to open ABLE accounts on their behalf. No comments have been received, and this is for final rule.
Do you want to do them together?
Certainly I can.
Thank you.
The next consent agenda item is to implement acts of the legislature regarding Start K-12. So this is to establish Start K-12. Again, this is final rule, to be able to allow individuals with Start accounts to be able to make withdrawals for Start K-12 purposes at the point in time until we get Start K-12 up and running, and to be able to add out-of-state proprietary schools as eligible for Start disbursements. Again, these are final rules. You approve these rules at your June 20th meeting, the first notice of intent. This is to make these final. And the LOSFA Advisory Board has reviewed all of this, and they do recommend your approval of these consent agenda items.
Thank you, Dr. Boutte. We have a motion from Regent Chabert.
Here.
Anyone else? We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda items before you? Hearing none, any opposition? Those motions pass. Thank you. Other business?
Yes, yes, ma'am. In the other business, we just wanted to make LATA members and board members aware of the Children's Savings Account House Continuing Resolution or Concurrent Resolution 22 by Representative Leger asked for the establishment of a Children's Savings Account Task Force. This is an informational item for you. The first task force meeting has been convened. Dr. Reed, of course, is a member, and Chairman Levy is a member, and he is chair of the task force. We have enlisted the assistance of a national organization called Prosperity Now. One of Prosperity Now's major functions is to help states and cities and entities establish children's savings accounts, and they've agreed to assist us. Here on this first slide, you basically see what CSAs are, which is basically a savings account akin to a 529 that would be established at birth for a child. It could be first grade or second grade. Sometimes individuals get to opt out of that, or you could have a universality where all students would be included. These are items that Representative Leger wants the task force to be able to consider. At the end of the day, recommendations will be sent to the Louisiana legislature for consideration. So these slides are just giving you savings accounts basics. You know, the student would open an account, or an account would be open. Savings would be grown for use for college. It's at issue whether the state seeds those accounts for all students or just for needy students. Again, things that are up for discussion. This gives you some national statistics about the number of children that are in children's savings accounts and states. And so it's just a point of information. We will continue to keep you informed. The next meeting of that task force is October 25th, which will be here upstairs in the board conference room.
And that's one day after the board's retreat.
Yes, sir.
In case anybody wanted to stay after that. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boutte. That concludes the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, our next committee will be that of the Audit Committee, and I believe that is you, Regent Seal.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Audit Committee meeting to order and ask Commissioner Reed if she will call the roll.
I'll call it. Regent Seal. So the committee members, Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Perez.
Here.
Regent Adley. Regent Chabert. Regent McDonald. Regent Tennyson.
Here.
Regent Wyatt. We do have a quorum.
First agenda item is number 3, the summary of observations for the travel and procurement card report. Please present this item.
Good morning. I'm Laura Swallow. I'm a director with PNN, and I'm going to give you a brief summary of the procurement and travel card internal audit that we just released last week. So we, for the period of July 1, 2017 through April 30th of 2018, evaluated travel and procurement card transactions for Board of Regents, LOSFA, and LUNCON. And the purpose was to determine if policies were being adhered to in the terms of those transactions. To do this, we obtained policies and procedures for each of the agencies. We conducted employee interviews to understand processes, responsibilities, and so forth within each of the organizations. And then we performed detailed transaction testing on a sample basis across each of the organizations. From a results standpoint, we identified 8 observations. All of the observations we identified to be of moderate to low risk to the Board of Regents. And the observations primarily related to the lack of completeness and consistent enforcement of a centralized agency policy and then training of that policy. So for a little bit of background information, prior to the audit scope period, the Board of Regents, LOSFA, and LUMCOM were separate entities. Shortly before the period of our audit scope, so again, we were looking at July 1 of 2017 through April 30th of 2018, those entities all became under the same umbrella under the Board of Regents. And so with that change happening so quickly, there wasn't enough time to develop a centralized agency policy for all 3 of those organizations. And so at that point in time, they determined that they were going to use the LOSFA agency policy until they could develop a centralized policy. And so if you look at our observations from the internal audit, which we have provided to each of the members of the audit committee, Management is in the process of updating a new policy that's going to be followed by all of the organizations, and we understand that that will be done by November 2018. The observations that we've identified in our internal audit report and the recommendations associated with each of those observations are going to be considered in development of that new policy, and then we understand that after that policy has been developed, that training is going to be provided to all of those who have either purchasing cards or approval authority within that process.
Thank you. That's an information item, does not require a vote. Now, would you give us an update on the internal audit process?
Absolutely. So, as you all know, at the August Audit Committee meeting, we presented our internal audit risk assessment as well as our proposed internal audit plan for year one of our contract. And that audit plan was approved by the members of the Audit Committee. Since then, as I just mentioned, we completed our internal audit of travel and procurement cards, and that report has been issued. And then we're currently in progress of performing an internal audit related to TOPS eligibility and renewals.
So is the audit program on schedule?
Yes, sir.
Is there any other business to come before the audit committee? Hearing none, then we'll now move for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion's made and motion is seconded. Without objection, then we're adjourned.
Thank you, Regent Seal. Our next committee meeting is Finance. Regent Chabert, please call your committee to order.
Thank you, Chair Levy. I'd like to call Finance Committee order. Terrence or Matthew, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Regent Chabert.
Here.
Regent David.
Here.
Regent Ewing.
Here.
Regent Lipsy.
Yes, sir.
Regent Markle.
Here.
Regent Pryor. Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Temple.
Here.
LCTCS representative. LSU representative. Southern System representative. UL System representative. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's move on to the first item on the agenda, the review and acceptance of the budget for fiscal year 2018-19.
Yes, sir. Yesterday, the Finance Committee met all day to review the FY19 operating budgets. All the systems came before the committee to answer questions about their budget and policy moving forward. The listed above is the total budget for FY19. It's a $2.7 billion budget with just over $1 billion in state general fund. And on the next slide is the breakdown by system for the $2.7 billion. And if there's no question, senior staff recommends approval of the FY19 operating budgets.
Are there any questions or comments on the budget? Hearing none, can I get a motion? Moved by Regent Seal, second by Regent Temple. Anyone opposed? Any questions or comments? Hearing none, motion passed. Go ahead, Matthew.
And that is it for finance.
We are adjourned. Motion from Regent Seal, second by David. Meeting adjourned.
All right, thank you, sir. We will move to the Academic and Student Affairs. Regent Chabert.
Yes, would you please, Dr. Denton, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Regent Chabert.
Here.
Regent David.
Here.
Regent Adley. Regent Kenny. Regent Pryor. Regent Temple.
Here.
Regent Wyatt. LCTCS representative. LSU representative. Southern representative.
Here.
And University of Louisiana representative.
Here.
We need one person from the executive committee.
I'll appoint myself.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Denby. Would you move on and explain everything on the consent agenda, please?
This is a slide that you have seen before. It lists the activities, the main activities that this committee is responsible for. you have seen it, we've gone through it. If you have any questions on any part of it, let me know.
Any, go ahead.
The first item on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes the reauthorization of 2 previously approved research units. The first is the Early Intervention Institute at the LSU Health Sciences Center in New Orleans. That institute focuses on research and training in the care of children with developmental disabilities. The second is the University of New Orleans Greater New Orleans Center for Information Assurance, which is focused on research and teaching in the area of cybersecurity. In addition to reauthorization of the center, UNO requests approval to rename it the University of New Orleans Cyber Center to better align with its mission and with prevalent terminology in the field. And next on the consent agenda are the routine staff reports. Senior staff recommend approval of the academic affairs consent agenda.
We recommend that is your recommendation to approve everything on the consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
We have a recommendation from the staff, moved by Regent Temple, second by Mr. Sabille. Any questions or comments? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passed.
Next, under academic programs, is a letter of intent from the LSU Health Sciences Center in Shreveport for a PhD in rehabilitation sciences, the first in the state and one of only a handful in the region. Rehab sciences is an interdisciplinary allied health field that brings together the human movement therapy fields like occupational, physical, speech, and recreational therapy, along with the complementary fields of biomedical and mechanical engineering. The Health Sciences Center developed the letter of intent in response to a shortage of qualified faculty in the rehab sciences and an increasing need for modern research in the growing allied health fields. The program would initially be implemented with existing faculty resources and would include concentrations in movement science and engineering, speech and language pathology, neurorehabilitation, and human development and pediatrics. Senior staff recommend approval of the letter of intent to develop a proposal for a PhD in rehabilitation sciences at the LSU Health Sciences Center in Shreveport.
Members, we have a recommendation from staff. Do I have any questions or comments? Can I have a motion? Moved by Regent Temple, second by Regent David. Any questions or comments? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Proceed.
Item 4B is academic program proposals. We have one proposal from Baton Rouge Community College to develop an Associate of Applied Science in Vehicle Maintenance and Repair Technologies. This program would combine 3 programs at the new state-of-the-art Automotive Center and the adjoining Collision Repair Center at Ardendale into one umbrella associate degree. Students may complete one of 3 existing technical diplomas: automotive technology, diesel heavy truck technology, and a new auto body repair technical diploma as concentrations in this degree, with an additional 15-hour general education core to earn the degree. All 3 of the concentrations have a 3-course core that they share. And those courses are on fundamentals of safety, electrical basics, and heating and air conditioning basics before they branch into their specific areas. Having this degree will improve efficiency and help ensure degree program viability. So senior staff recommend that the committee conditionally approve the proposed Associate of Applied Science with a progress report due in February of 2020.
Thank you, Dr. Denby. Members, we have a recommendation from the committee. Any questions or discussion? Get a motion from Regent David, second by Regent Temple. Any questions or comment? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passed.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is a report to the governor on the governor's military and veteran-friendly campus designation for the coming year. In the 2015 legislative session, Act 232 established the designation as the governor's military and veteran-friendly campus for campuses that meet at least 8 specific requirements. The purpose of the designation, or of the the legislative act was to encourage statewide system of support to aid veteran students in their transition from military service to college enrollment. The law requires an annual report and application for continuing designation based on fulfillment of all of the requirements, including the provision of specific data on implementation of the first 4 mandatory requirements. For the last 2 years, all institutions have fully participated except for River Parishes Community College and Southern University in Shreveport. This year there are 26 institutions qualifying as friendly campuses, if you will. They may advertise themselves as such and use the governor's military and veteran-friendly campus logo on their websites if they wish. Senior staff recommends approval to endorse the following 26 institutions as having met the requirements to receive that designation and forward their names to the governor. And they are on the screen, but again, it's all of the 2-year colleges and universities except for RPCC and Southern and Shreveport at this time.
Dr. Denbick, thank you. Members, we have a recommendation from the staff. Moved by Regent David, second by Regent Temple. Any discussion or comments? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Proceed.
I just have an information item for you as other business, and that is the articulation and transfer report update that we submit annually. When Senator Ben Nevers was an active senator, his signature campaign was student articulation and transfer, and in 2009, he proposed Act 356, which led to the Louisiana Transfer Degree Statewide Articulation and Transfer Council, and expansion of the Master Articulation Matrix with common course numbers. The Act became a series of laws under Chapter 25A, Articulation and Transfer, that require an annual report of data focusing on associate degree transfers. And so the slide just shows you some of the basic information. The Louisiana Transfer Degree, if you recall, is an associate degree that all of the SACS COC accredited 2-year schools offer. It includes the 39-hour general education core and 21 credits of electives that relate to the student's potential major, and that transfers in whole to a university so that a student begins as a junior with a strong head start toward graduation. It's a tough degree, though, because it requires at least a C grade on every course that's counted toward the degree. In the first year that it was offered, 7 students graduated because they were already on their way for it. But it's grown to 277 graduates in 17-18. You can see on the slide, 56% of the 1,314 Louisiana transfer graduates that the schools have produced so far have enrolled in a university. So 56% of the graduates have transferred to universities. Looking at the single year's associate degree graduates, 20% of the 16-17 graduates have enrolled in universities, but among the transfer-specific degrees, 61% over the last 2 years of Louisiana transfers, and 73% of the Associate of Science in Teaching students have moved on to the university, which is exactly the intent of those degrees, while only 11% of Associate of Science in Nursing students and graduates with the Associate of Applied Science have moved on to the university, which is also the intent of those degrees, because those are more preparation for going directly to work. Finally, 33% of the 2017-18 baccalaureate graduates began as transfer students, which is similar to about 6 years ago. But 15% of those transfer graduates also had an associate degree, and that is quite a change in the culture of students, where in 2011-12 that number was only 7. So bottom line is Senator Nevers' legislation is working.
Is
More
working.
students are earning associate degrees, and they are moving on to the university.
Thank you, Dr. Denby.
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Chairman Levy.
Dr. Denby, you and I talked about this the other day, and I honestly have slept and forgot a little bit about what the answer was. A lot of these transfer students don't wait the whole 2 years to get a transfer degree.
That is correct.
Those that wait to get a 2-year transfer degree do in fact transfer at a higher rate to the 4-year schools.
Yes, sir.
Those that wish to transfer before they get the transfer degree, somewhere maybe after their first year at a community college, they don't go forward to the 4-year schools to the same degree. And if they do they have the same completion and retention and completion as the transfer students?
I think I understand your question.
I think one of my issues in my mind was that some of these students don't want to wait around at the community college for 2 years to get that transfer degree, but those that do in fact transfer and do in fact succeed quite well. Those that transfer before they get a 2-year degree to a 4-year school do so in lesser numbers and have lesser success at that 4-year school?
Well, it takes them longer to graduate from the 4-year school
Right.
because they transfer with less courses. They don't necessarily have a different success at the 4-year school, but they have different rates of transfer. Someone who graduates with an associate degree doesn't necessarily go straight to the university. Sometimes they take that associate degree and work for a while, but when they do start, they have a 60-hour head
Right.
start toward that bachelor.
And a guaranteed acceptance and...
If they have the Louisiana transfer, yes, sir. So
Either way, it's working.
either way, it's
working.
yes,
Do we
sir.
have a number of how many people went to work versus transferred to school?
Well, we don't know what actually they
They
do
would- yeah,
when they
okay.
leave.
All right, any other business to come before any other questions of Dr. Denby or Ms. Janet? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Regent Temple, second by Regent David. Any discussion? Hearing none, motion, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Regent Chabert. We now move to Sponsored Programs Committee. Regent Markle, would you please call your committee to order?
Thank you, Regent Levy. I'd like to call the Sponsored Program Committee to order. Ms. Robinson, would you please read the roll?
Yes, sir. Chair Markle,
Here?
Vice Chair Perez. Here. Regent Chabert.
Here.
Regent David.
Here.
Regent Kenny. Regent McDonald. Here. Regent Meyer.
next.
Regent Seal.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first agenda item is the consent agenda. Ms. Robinson, please begin.
Yes, sir. The first slide in the presentation is just the reminder of what Sponsored Programs is responsible for. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any. And we will move straight to the consent agenda, which has 2 items. The first, a request for a limited waiver of the endowed chairs and professorships expendable funds cap. If you remember, in policy now, the endowed chairs and endowed professorships recipients have to spend down the balance, the expendable balances in their accounts, and LSU Health Sciences Center has 2, 1 chair, 1 professorship currently, that are recently appointed, and they would like to give these individuals a little bit of time to make sure that they're spending prudently and strategically, and so they've asked for a 5-year waiver of the funds cap. We also have a request from LSU A&M for a retroactive appointment of an endowed shareholder. This is really just a situation in which the chair was not included in the advertisement for the position, though the chair is aligned with the position that was filled, and they're asking to retroactively appoint the holder since that person has been in place for more than a year. And the senior staff recommends approval of both of these items.
All right, members, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda in globo? Hearing the motion and seconded, is there any discussion? Are there any objections to the motion? Hearing no objections, the motion passes. We will now move on to item 4, Board of Regents support fund matching the statewide federal initiative. I think that involves LUNCOM. Ms. Robinson, would you please proceed?
Yes, sir. We have a request from LumCon, and Dr. Craig McLean, who is the executive director of LumCon, is here to talk a little bit about the request and answer any questions you might have. In essence, the request is for $500,000 to be expended over 2 years to purchase research days on a regional class research vessel that LumCon is submitting proposals to NSF to secure. Craig, if you'd like to speak to the proposal.
So, LumCon is part of a Gulf consortium including the University of Southern Mississippi and several. Oh, that might help. Several other entities that to bring a regional class research vessel to the Gulf of Mexico. This is a $90 million state-of-the-art research vessel, totally paid for by the National Science Foundation. Our proposal is to operate this vessel as its chief operator. This has a tremendous amount of research capacity. We would be bringing a tremendous amount of research capacity to the Gulf of Mexico that doesn't currently exist. The ability of this ship would allow us to reach the total extent of the Gulf of Mexico for scientific research into the Caribbean and to the Atlantic Ocean. That capacity doesn't currently exist now. Our other research vessel, the Pelican, and the Point Sur that we also operate, they're limited to the northern Gulf of Mexico. If we were successful in the bid to operate this vessel, it would yield a grant of $3.8 million to build up the facilities and the infrastructure of LumCon to actually be able to handle this ship. The return of investment is likely to be about 50 to 1 on the original investment of the ship. That's based on our estimates from the Pelican. We had an economic impact statement done of what the RCRV would do for the region. That should exceed over $750 million, as well as the prestige of having one of these 3 regional class research vessels that will bring to both LumCon and the state of Louisiana.
And I would just say this really does hit the sweet spot of what the support fund would like to support in terms of match. It is a truly statewide project. It will impact every institution of higher education in the state. It has major advantages and benefits to both Louisiana and to LumCon and all of its member institutions, and is truly sustainable in the long term. So with that, the senior staff recommends approval of this request.
Yeah, just real, Craig, would you explain where the money's coming from to do this?
The money for the vessel itself?
The 250,000 or the $500,000, 250,000 that
I can explain that. Right. That money will come out of the Board of Regents Support Fund, out of unexpended dollars. And you might ask, since what I generally tell you about the support fund is we are in dire financial straits, you might well ask why we have $500,000 that we can commit. And the reason that we have this is really a product of the budgeting process. We write the budget every year. We spend within our budget authority. And every year, the amount of money we receive at the end of the year after we've done all the spending is a little bit different than the amount of money that we actually brought to you for expenditure. Sometimes it's a little low, sometimes it's a little high, but the support fund operates as a closed system. So when it is a little high, those monies remain as unexpended dollars in the support fund account, and that provides us with the ability to make this kind of, to entertain this kind of special request. That's what
Thank you. I think it's a great request. I'm wholeheartedly for, but I wanted some of the newer members to understand what, that we weren't just grabbing this money and taking it with.
Mr. Lipsey?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I just want to, for the benefit of the newer members, since our board brought LumCon under the Board of Regents recently, the same time we brought LOTSA under the Board of Regents, LumCon was then one of the best kept secrets in the state, but they really were not performing to the level of what their original charter was. And since LumCon came under the Board of Regents, Dr. McLean took over the improvements, everything that the LumCon has done has been incredible movements forward. And LumCon now is having a significant impact not only on LUMCOM itself in South Louisiana, but on every college in the state. And Dr. McLean deserves a lot of credit. This is a very important project, and we need to work with our senators and legislators to make sure we get this ship moved to LUMCOM. But LUMCOM has an entirely different face now, and its faculty, its research, and more importantly, its teaching efforts are greatly improved under the leadership of Dr. McLean, and this will be a real feather in all of our caps if we can get this ship located at LUMCOM. So I highly endorse what LUMCOM is doing, and I ask for the support of the board on this project.
Regent Chaubert?
Yeah, I meant to ask you this yesterday, Craig. Have you talked to Congressman Scalise about this? I mean,
We have been in contact and have letters of support from our entire congressional delegation.
Okay. But have you talked to Steve himself about this?
We've talked to members of his staff.
Okay.
Regent Ewing?
Yes. When would the ship be available to us?
It is scheduled to come online in 2023.
Why do you need the money now?
That is a fantastic question. So we are submitting the proposal.
I just asked questions.
We are submitting the proposal this fall, and we need to show that there's a need and state and institutional support to bring that vessel here. The National Science Foundation wants to see that we are really committed to this vessel, and by saying we are going to put 10 days of ship use automatically right off the bat goes a long way. And in fact, this was the same strategy that the University of Rhode Island used to successfully win the bid to operate the second of these vessels. And so that's one of the reasons. The other reason why that I think that this is important is that we talk about the importance of getting this ship here and the importance of LUMCON, but these 10 days will be distributed out to researchers, oceanographers, marine scientists in the state with the intent that they will go out to sea, they will collect preliminary data in which will make them able to successfully acquire additional federal funding for that continued research. So this is sort of, you can think of this in some sense as a business incubator style model in which we're going to provide the seed funding to get these groups going. They're going to utilize the vessel, which then in turn will bring back more money to the state in the terms of federal grant dollars.
What's the magic of 500,000? I understand 2 years. So you make a commitment for 2 years, and then you feel like that puts you in a secure position to get this ship and to use it for the purposes that you've explained. And you did a great job yesterday telling us about that. But I'm just wondering where the magic of 500, is that how much we had in the purse?
No, sir. The ask of 10 days is what a standard research trip would look like on this vessel. So that would be 2 days of transit in and out of port and 8 days at sea. That is a substantial amount of time to accomplish a very large sort of research project.
Was there consideration of nailing 1 year and a contingency on the second year?
No, I proposed it 2 years because I figured I made the assumption that's what it would take to make sure that we could lock in repetitive use of the ship. So by the 3rd year, we'll have the ship up and running. We'll have a market for this vessel. We'll have a variety of users. And the match that I'm asking for from the Board of Regents is in conjunction with the University of Southern Mississippi seeking out a similar match of funds, Texas A&M, University of Alabama. So the idea is that all the Gulf states are going to put up anywhere. Ours would be the largest match at 10 days. But I believe we have the largest research need, given the sort of pressing scientific questions we have in the state. that will show that there's a real Gulf commitment to this ship and the success of this ship.
When would the draw on the money be? Immediate or at the time that the ship came in?
The draw on the money would be in the first 2023 and 2024.
Thank you.
And really, the timing issue here is a solicitation of proposals issue. The solicitation for proposals will either is out or will be out shortly from the National Science Foundation. The proposal has to include the committed matches from the states. So it's not typical, because this is an unusual proposal for the support fund. It's not typical that we'd have this long lag time from the time we commit the monies and earmark it for this purpose and the actual use of the funds. But that's really just the way that these kinds of major infrastructure proposals work. They're soliciting the proposal so far in advance of when the vessel will actually be ready for use.
Any other questions? I have a few, Doctor. The NSF must approve this operation before the funds are committed, correct?
This is contingent upon them accepting our proposal as the operator of the regional class research vessel, yes.
And what is the status of that at this point?
The call for proposals will be this fall. We had submitted a proposal in the spring with the entire Gulf Consortium. That was not approved, and the largest reservation from the review committee was there seemed to be a lack. They were afraid that the ship was essentially going to set in port and not be utilized.
Set in our port?
Said yes, that it would be underutilized in the Gulf of Mexico. And so this is why we're seeking the commitment of 10 days in the first 2 years from all of our sort of all the state entities as a pluses, and as well as several environmental consulting firms that have done work with the Pelican and with LUMCON in the past. So we're really trying to show that we can book out 150 days to 200 days per year.
All right. And that's between those states you just described, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, if the NSF does not approve the project, what happens to the money?
The money would be retained with the Board of Regents in the support fund. We would not utilize the funds.
At this point, we will, if the board approves this request, the staff will obligate the money on our books, so the money can't be used for other purposes. If we receive word from Craig that for some reason the proposal was not approved for funding, then we'll just remove the obligation.
Okay. A little bit of an ignorant question I'm about to pose here. Who owns the vessel?
The National Science Foundation owns the vessel.
And they will continue to do so, correct?
And will continue to do so.
So we're just talking about where the vessel is going to be ported.
And who operates and crews and receives the funding. So these ships, basically, both the Pelican and the Pointer and this new RCRV are leased out. This vessel will lease out at $25,000 a day. So, and all of those revenues are retained by the operating institution for maintenance of that ship, for the crew, and any additional monies generated go back into marine operations. So it actually would allow us to increase our marine infrastructure at LUMCON
so
from the revenue. So
we would be considered the operating entity?
That's right, we would be.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Just to mention, Mr. Markle, it's not really, it's a lot about the money. And I think LUMCON will greatly benefit from this, as will the state of Louisiana. But what is terrific about it is the credibility that it gives LUMCON and the state of Louisiana to operate this vessel, which will be the newest and most powerful research vessel in the country. And that is the feather in our cap.
And I think the comment about rate of return, was it 50 to 1? I mean, that's significant in addition to what Mr. Lipsey just indicated, the information that the world will receive that Louisiana is doing well in the marine side is important to the state of Louisiana. So to me, the $500,000 is an easy investment. So with that being said, are there any other discussions or questions?
So
I hear a motion to approve the recommendation. There's a motion. There's a second. Are there any objections to the motion? Hearing no objections, the motion passes. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other business, Ms. Robinson, to come before the board?
For other business, I would just like to briefly kick off formally our budgeting process for the year. We do this every year in the support fund.
Well, Doc, if you'll stay, I've got one question for you. On a new business.
Okay. Okay, so I'll move quickly through this. Typically, the board will consider action on the support fund budget in December or January because everything has to go to the legislature 60 days prior to session, so we have to finish it in January for that to happen. Just to remind you of what the support fund is and how we're constituted, the support fund is run off of the earnings from the Louisiana Education Quality Trust Fund, which is housed in the Treasury. It's dedicated to PK through 12 and higher education. We divide the annual earnings with Bessie, as well as 25% of the annual earnings are rolled back into the trust fund for fund growth. We are constitutionally charged to do 4 things in the support fund: endowment of chairs for eminent scholars, enhancement of academic research in agricultural departments and units, targeted research and development, and recruitment of superior graduate students. So we do those things through granting programs and endowment matching programs. We get 2 sources of expendable revenue. Did you have a question? Okay. I know that there was a question that came up yesterday as to why we lost $2.5 million in statutory dedications in the support fund that came up at the budget hearings, and this will somewhat answer that question. We have 2 sources of revenue that come into the support fund. The first is investment earnings. So the Treasury invests the trust fund. That trust fund generates earnings, and those are poured back into the pool of available funds. We also get royalty income from the Gulf sector that was affected by the settlement that established the trust fund. Our average annual revenue since 1986, when the fund was established, is $26.7 million. I bring this up because we're nowhere near that now. The total value of the trust fund as of December 2017 was $1.4 billion. We'll get a new number in December of 2018 when John Broussard comes from the Treasurer's office to give us that annual update. This is a picture of our revenues and expenditures from the beginning of the support fund through today, as best we know. You can see that it jumped in the late 80s up to a level of about $25 million and stayed there or above for most of its history until now, when it plummeted to around $20 million. The reasons for this are that the Treasury is highly circumscribed in how the investment income from the trust fund can be invested and how it can earn money. And in a zero interest rate environment, those restrictions led to very low yields to the trust fund. In addition, the royalty income kept the trust fund afloat for several years, but that's changed recently due to a couple of factors. One, the drop in the oil markets. 2, the sector that is associated with the support fund is almost dry. And 3, we owe a large amount of money, about $5 million, to the Department of the Interior for overpayments to Louisiana from the beginning of the fund. This was a result of redrawing boundaries in the Gulf of Mexico and then applying the redrawing of those boundaries retroactively. It was litigated for several years, and finally the state lost that litigation, and now we have to return the funds, the overpayments, to the Department of Interior. There is a repayment plan in place. It will take place over 3 years, but that essentially for the support fund side alone means that we will lose about $500,000 per year in garnishing of our royalty incomes for that purpose. Where are we now? This is what it's looked like in terms of our revenues over the past 10 years and what it looks like going into the future. What revenue estimating is projecting, and this was affirmed at the meetings last week, they're projecting us to remain steady at about $20 million. The latest estimates we have from the Treasury are significantly lower. Treasury generally is significantly lower at 16.5 currently than revenue estimating. But It's important to note, if you look at this, revenue estimating has been closer to right than Treasury over the last couple of years. So that gives us hope that we will reach about $20 million in the coming years. We did reach a little bit more than $20 million in 2018. We got about 20.2 if you back out the funds that were returned to our fund. Yes, sir.
Dr. Robinson, is there any chance, since the state had this $300 million surplus, is number one, is there any chance of asking the state to reimburse us for the $5 million? Number two, is there any chance of us asking for legislation next year? If the state, if we ask right now and the budget office says no, is there any chance of us introducing legislation to ask the state to reimburse us for that $5 million?
I would say at this point, and Uma, I would invite Uma to come up and speak to the legal issues here. We've entered into a repayment agreement that involves garnishing the payments from the royalties with the Department of Interior. We haven't explored those possibilities, especially since that surplus is fairly new information. But I would ask Uma to talk to you.
Sure. The Department of Interior redrew the boundaries which affected 5 states. The losers, Louisiana and Alabama, were 2 states that lost out in this redrawing of the boundaries. Mississippi, Texas, and Florida. Those are the 3 that the redrawing was in their favor, such that they had more territory and their revenues, oil revenues, were higher. The litigation was handled by the Attorney General's office, and the stakeholders within the state are the Department of Education, BESI, basically, because 50% of the revenues come to us, 50% to BESI, and then the state treasury. So all of us were involved. The AG's office led the litigation. At this point, we have a repayment plan. The legislature can definitely put general funds to pay off the debt to the Department of Interior. What cannot happen is any money from the AG funds flowing out for different purposes, but there's generally no prohibition against state general funds being used to pay off the offset. So that is something that we can definitely ask for, and we have a 3-year plan split between BESI and the Board of Regents.
And Treasury.
And Treasury, yes.
Well, the plan that was devised, we each pay our proportional share. So each entity, each of the 3 entities that gets a share of the revenues that come in will pay that proportion back to Department of Interior. So that leaves BESI and Regents splitting the 75% and Treasury reimbursing the 25%. And just finally, the budget development process. So that's the information we know and the information with which we start the budget development process. There are several steps in our budget development process before you see it in December. There are 2 advisory steps. We will formulate an initial recommendation and take that to our planning and advisory committees, which are comprised of memberships from all of the systems, public and private, as well as government agencies that are interested in higher education and research and development, economic development, and those issues. Those are that's our advisory process, and then we bring to you in December or January, we will bring their decisions to you for your consideration and adoption. The formal plan and budget will be transmitted to the legislature upon your approval. We'll transmit to the legislature and governor, but it has to be there at least 60 days prior. It's considered as part of House Bill 1 and built into House Bill 1. The final budget and spending authority will be stipulated when House Bill 1 is finalized, and our fiscal year for what we will consider in December, that fiscal year will begin July 1.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. On the new business, I just have one quick question, Doctor, and again, it's talking out of ignorance more than anything. Would it serve us any purpose to actually own a research vessel? Could we make any money on it?
So we do own the Pelican
Okay.
which is the new regional class research vessel is scheduled to be 199 feet long. It's a substantial sized ship. Our current vessel, the Pelican, is 116 feet, and it is owned by the state of Louisiana. The state of Louisiana paid for it to be built. It is near the end of its life. We have about 5 to 6 years left on it.
Is there any thought of replacing it?
We are currently in, the Department of Administration actually granted us funds to actually start the redesign process. So we're currently in the design process now of a new Pelican replacement. And we are getting we're currently trying to get the estimates of how much it would cost to replace that, to rebuild that. And that's tentatively
the reason I bring
between.
it up is that there are a lot of vessels out there that would fit this need. There's a ton of them, okay? So after this is over with, touch base with me if you would, because I can tell you some people we can go get some pretty cheap right now, okay?
Absolutely, sounds
All right,
great.
Is there any other new business to come before the board, for this committee? Hearing none, I have a motion to adjourn. Have a second. We now adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Our next committee meeting is statewide programs, Chairman Regent Seal.
Dr. Subramanian, would you please call the roll for the committee?
Yes, sir. Regent Seal, Regent Wyatt, Regent Adley, Regent Lipsy,
He's here.
Regent McNaughton, Regent Pryor, Regent Temple,
Here.
4 and a quorum.
We do have a quorum?
With 4.
Seal, Chavez, Lipsy, Temple. Need 5, I think, Boomer. I'll appoint myself from the executive committee.
Sorry, I thought Regent Pryor was here.
We do have 5?
We have 5.
More?
Yes.
2.
Mr. Chair, you would need to appoint somebody
We
from
got
the
5.
executive committee.
Got it.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So we do have a quorum, and I believe Dr. Boutte is going to present the consent item number 3. Is that right?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Regents, the first one is a final rule. Again, these rules, the first notice of intent came before you at the June 20th, 2018 meeting. So basically what these rules do is to implement Act 671 of the 2018 regular legislative session. They also add course equivalencies to the TOPS Opportunity, Performance, Honors, and TOPS Tech cores. Any questions about that?
Are there questions?
The next consent agenda item is, again, another final rule, and we are asking, these are changes to the Chafee Education Training Voucher Program. So for those of you who may not be familiar with that, the Chafee Education Training Voucher Program provides a scholarship of up to $5,000 per academic year to students who were in or are in the foster care system. LOSFA administers this program in conjunction with the Department of Children and Family Services through a memorandum of understanding. The reason that this rule change is necessary is because on August 23rd, 2018, DCFS notified LOSFA that there have been changes in the federal law with respect to Chafee. So these rules are necessary to be able to bring that into line with what we have currently operating. So that's that. Any questions about that?
Please.
One question. You said work in or are part?
Yes, sir. Either they've aged out of the foster care system or they are in the foster care system.
Currently, either okay, so they've gone through it or they're in it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, for example, the eligibility changes, and maybe this will help to clarify it some, decreases the minimum age of eligibility to 14 from 16. increases the maximum age of eligibility to 26, which was 23 before, provided that the student has been enrolled in post-secondary education and is making satisfactory academic progress in their program of study, limits eligibility to a maximum of 5 years, whether or not those years are consecutive is okay, and provides that youth who exit the foster care system through legal guardianship, adoption, or aging out of the system or other reasons may qualify for this particular program. So DCFS has reviewed this attached rulemaking, and it has advised our LOSFA Advisory Board and LOSFA programs that it provides all the necessary amendments at this time.
Do we have a history on that?
Yes, sir. We have history on the fact that what we have done with the Chafee Educational Training Voucher. We've been administering this program in conjunction with DCFS since 2010, and I can send you those statistics.
That's a great program. Thank you.
Any further questions about that?
Please continue.
Okay. All right. The next consent agenda item is approval of exceptions for TOPS. These are exceptions that require continuous enrollment and the exception to earn the 24 hours. The students present their cases to the LOSFA staff. Those case justifications then goes to the LOSFA Advisory Board, and both of these entities have reviewed these exceptions. Questions about that one? The next and final consent agenda item is approval of the TOPS exceptions to the deadline for filing of FAFSA. This is exceptions. The students are required to file the FAFSA by the Board of Regents administrative rules no later than 120 days after the July 1st following their 1-year anniversary of graduation from high school. That's a mouthful. Since you set this deadline, you have the authority to be able to allow an exception to the deadline. We have exceptions. This, again, the same process. These go through our committees, then they go through our advisory board, and all of the documentation has been received and reviewed. As a point of reference, these two are individuals who were in the National Guard, and at the time that their deadline occurred, they were in training camp. So obviously they would not have been able to file the FAFSA, so we do believe that this justifies you allowing these exceptions. So the LOSFA Advisory Board has reviewed all of these consent agenda items, and they do recommend the Regents' approval.
Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda item number 3, the consent in globo? Regent McDonald has made the motion. Regent Chabert has seconded. Without objection, then that is adopted. Let's move to item 4, the update on the implementation of the hazing prevention laws.
This agenda item is for your information only. No action is needed. As you may recall, there was a uniform policy that the Board of Regents adopted at the last meeting. Between June, when the law was enacted, and now in September, a lot has happened. The Board of Regents adopted the policy that was developed in conjunction with the 4 management boards and their staff. And the institutions have now developed their own policies as required by the law. We are trying now at this stage, institutions are implementing both the laws and the policies at their respective campuses. And what we are trying to do at this time is to make sure that the message is received loud and clear that even though this behavior may have occurred over many decades, what has changed is the legal consequences of such behavior. So we are making sure that the students know that this is a felony conduct, and the consequences are severe. It can be punished by prison sentence up with or without hard labor. So this is not to be taken lightly. That's the message we are trying to send to the campuses and the students. The campuses have started providing student education as also required by the law, and the organizations such as your band club, your chess club, your Greek organizations, they have started providing the required training to their members and prospective members. This is the first year of implementation, so there's a lot to be done. And we are going forward, what we are trying to do is develop a uniform training module for all campuses to use. But that's some ways off. We are not there yet. So this year, the first year of implementation, we are monitoring the campuses and their implementation. We have reviewed the policies of the institutions to make sure that they comply with the law. And I have noted some deficiencies, and I've been talking to the management board staff to make sure that they revise the policies to bring them into compliance. And as far as the implementation and the message to the students, when that is concerned, that requires a lot of someone who can speak their language. Lucky me, I have a young and hip colleague here who helped me with that, and Nikki Godfrey and Meg Casper came along board. So among the three of them, they have tried to craft a message and send it to the campuses. This week is the National Hazing Prevention Week, September 24th through the 28th. So there are events scheduled all across the state. The commissioner kicked off the week at Hammond, at Southeastern. Tanisha was there with the commissioner, and so was Nikki. So soon we will hear from Nikki and Tanisha about the events for this week. And we are also partnering with the student body presidents. Nikki, who serves on that board, she is reaching out to the campuses to make sure that the student leaders take the message to their peers across the state. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Tanisha to explain to you what she has done, the magic she has done.
So what you see on the screen is a flyer that we created and handed to all the campuses. They also have a shirt with that logo, These Hands Don't Haze, and there's LA for Louisiana. And we traveled to Hammond on Monday, and we had the chance to meet with students. It was a very changing experience to understand that the students didn't understand what hazing was and how often they only think of the big cases of your alcohol and not the small things. And many of them hadn't even reviewed the law to know the actual criminal penalties. So hopefully through this week, the campuses are expressing that to students and throughout the semester. This is also a picture of the banner that we made and also the students as they through this campus. I think this is LSU E. This is another one.
So we are really trying to change the culture across the campuses. This is not going to be your boys will be boys type of culture. We are going to take this seriously, and we are going to make sure that the students get the message. So that's what we are working on. And next month, I'm planning on meeting with the management board staff, because right now, between the policy and the law and the implementation, we want to give them at least this month to focus on the implementation to get it right. So I'll be meeting with them again, and we are going to work on some uniform training modules going forward. And another thing that I wanted to mention to you is that right now, starting with the July 2018, we have the Louisiana Center Addressing Substance Abuse in Collegiate Communities, LACASU for short. That is now housed within the Board of Regents. It used to be at LSU. They're operating out of a grant that DHH provides us, and my colleague Allison Smith, I don't think she's here today. She goes across, oh, she is. She goes across the state, providing campuses training on substance abuse and compliance with federal laws. If you have any questions, I can ask Allison to come up and provide the answers to you. If not, that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Do we have other business to discuss? Dr. Boutte.
Yes, sir. Regents, we passed out our playbill for our Financial Literacy for You tour. We call it affectionately the Fly Tour. You see the dates here. We were very proud that we do this tour twice a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. We're currently setting spring dates as we speak, but we're very proud that in the dates that you see on the handout and in the playbill, we were able to reach over 1,700 middle to high school students. So the Fly Tour is a dramatic presentation filled with song and dance and facts about financial literacy, about the FAFSA, about TOPS Tech, about deadlines, things that we want students to be able to know and have in mind as they are on their college access journey. We conduct the fly tour at university campuses because this is also an opportunity for us to be able to impart financial literacy lessons and combine that with a college experience and a college tour for students. We are extremely grateful to President Gallo and his amazing team at GSU, because after our fly tour there on Tuesday, they asked us to do an encore performance that Saturday as a part of their high school preview day. That was over 2,000 students. So again, when you count the 1,700 that we were able to do, plus the high school preview day, we're extremely excited. So we just wanted to let you know about this particular initiative. So this is just a picture of the playbill, and I've given you an actual playbill. What I'd like for you to be able to notice, and then some pictures from Southeastern. We kicked it off there, so thank you to President Crane there. And so we did Southeastern, GSU, Southern, LSU, and Central Louisiana Technical Community College, meaning that students had a chance to be able to see 2-year options and 4-year options. And also thank you to Harold Boutte, because he arranged for the Student Government Association presidents to be able to give a welcome at each of those particular fly tour shows. One thing I'd like to point your attention out to in the playbill, if you look at this particular page, you'll see our website, Unlock My Future. This references our website that we have that is free for students to be able to use. This is a tool that we use with students and parents to be able to determine their post-secondary match and fit. And we have a 5-point match that we use. And when you look for each of the institutions, that 5-point match, those components that you see, aptitude, skills and interest, academic, cost of choice, social and emotional, and retention, we ask each of those campuses to address how they fit that 5-point match uniquely on their campus. Again, the objective here is that an undermatched student is not a successful student, particularly when it comes to limited income students. And what we don't want students to do is to be able to choose a campus or a post-secondary option, whether that be career, military, 2 or 4 year certificate or credential, based upon who has the best baseball or football team or a great Saturday night in somebody's stadium. That's not going to help them be productive citizens, although it may enrich their college experience. So just wanted to bring this to you and give you a copy of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Is there any other business coming before the Statewide Programs Committee?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can
Yes,
we
sir.
back up a little bit? I missed something, or I don't understand it. When we were talking about the Louisiana Center addressing substance use, and it says now part of the Board of Regents, is this a whole new area of responsibility that we have assumed?
Dr. Subramanian, would you address that, please?
I'm just asking to flesh that out a little bit. What is our mode of operation, our authority, that type of thing
Thank you for the question, Regent.
in administering this?
Good morning. My name is Alice Smith. I'm the program administrator for the LaCastle office. Previously, we have been operating at Louisiana State University since January of 1998. It began after the death of Benjamin Wynn from binge drinking related hazing in 1997. What we have been doing currently at LSU up until July of 2018 is working with all of the campuses, administering a statewide core alcohol and drug survey, providing professional development and technical assistance. And we do that with the staff of the campus members that typically see students who have substance use issues. And so it was something that we had already currently been doing at Louisiana State University, but our entire office and broader programs have moved over to the Board of Regents.
Are we in an advisory capacity or in an executive capacity?
We are in a coordinating and advisory capacity. On all matters related to campus safety, our authority is only what the law gives us, because this does not fall within our planning, coordination, and budgetary responsibility that the Constitution gives us. So for sexual assault survey, that was done by law a few years ago. This year, hazing was done by law. And this program, this is a grant from DHH. And because it was housed at LSU, but it extended beyond just LSU, it was brought to the Board of Regents as part of our campus safety efforts. But everything that we do in the campus safety arena, all of that is not in the executive capacity, but in a coordinating capacity, if that makes sense.
We have what is our responsibility? A fiduciary responsibility to administer and see that this program is implemented?
No, sir. I think this is more by way of training and education and outreach.
Okay. I'll quit reading all this stuff.
Regent Ewing, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions or any other business come before the committee? In that event, we'll now move for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion's been made and seconded. Without objection, we are in adjournment.
Thank you, Regent Seal. Our next committee is the Planning, Research, and Performance, chaired by Regent Temple. Please call your committee to order, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Planning, Research, and Performance Committee to order. Dr. Tremblay, you'll take the roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Good morning again. Chair Temple.
Here.
Vice Chair Adley. Regent David.
He's here.
He's here.
He just
okay.
left. He left.
He's gone?
He left.
Okay.
Regent Ewing.
Here.
Regent McDonald.
Here.
Regent Perez.
Here.
Regent Pryor. Regent Tennyson.
Here.
Regent Wyatt. That means we have 5 and a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Tremblay, move on to item 3 on our consent agenda.
Sure. Under the consent agenda, well, first, this is just a slide of kind of who we are, what we do. Assuming there are no questions, I'll move on to the consent agenda. Under the consent agenda, we have one license renewal.
I know we do have a couple of new members. Are there any questions just about exactly what it is that we do here? You probably have already been made aware. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Under consent agenda, we have one license renewal of the academic degree granting institutions, Remington College. We have one state authorization reciprocity agreement renewal from Xavier University of Louisiana. We have, under our proprietary schools advisory commission recommendations, we have one initial license for the National Aesthetic Laser Institute. We have 4 AOS degree applications from Digital Media Institute at Intertech. And we have, I believe, 31 annual license renewals on the proprietary. Senior staff recommends the approval of the items on its consent agenda.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Second. Any discussion? Motion passes. Let's continue. Next item is item 4.
Next item is a conditional license extension for World Quant University. World Quant University received its initial 3-year license in 2015. It is seeking accreditation with the Distance Education Accrediting Council. It has one Master of Science program. Under the stipulations that were included in the August 15th recommendation, they were to file annual updates. They did that September 16 and 17. And then they were supposed to file an application for a new license this month. And by this month, the stipulation was that they will have submitted their application for candidacy with DEAC. In their annual report to us, they mentioned that they were going to file their application in January, which is 4 months after the stipulation. So we contacted Will Quant University seeking an explanation, and they submitted a rather lengthy explanation, but I summarize it on the slide. One is they had a change of leadership, and a lot of times when you have a change of leadership, there's some changes in mission and vision and operations. They were having some issues with their online program management company, so they had to change those, and that kind of sent them back. But most importantly, they entered into a contract with EduCred Services, which is a consultant service that really specializes in all matters of DEAC standards. And so that consulting service came back with a number of recommendations that it suggested that Will Quant follow prior to submitting its application for DEAC candidacy. We thought that was very wise on their part. So taking that all into account, the senior staff recommendation is for the committee to approve an extension of the conditional license until February 1, so roughly a 4-month extension. If the DEAC application for candidacy is filed by the deadline, then Will Quant will continue to be licensed under the original conditions that were included in the September 15 recommendation this board adopted. If the DEAC application is not filed by that deadline, then the board will consider not approving an additional license for Will Quant.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the motion? Second. Okay. Any discussion? Motion passes, so February 1st. Next item, item 5, proposed first-time freshman admissions audit plan.
Yes, I believe everyone who's here now was at the board development this morning. We discussed this at some length this morning, and I'd just like to make one other comment that I meant to make this morning, is when I talked about exceptional students. Oftentimes, you know, in our core, we have 4, 4, 4, 4, plus 2 units in the same foreign language, plus 1 unit of art. That's the 19 required units of the core. Sometimes we'll have students that may have a, I don't know, 30 on the ACT, they may have a 4.0 GPA, but instead of taking 2 units in the same foreign language, they chose to take French 1 and Spanish 1 just to find out which foreign language they enjoyed more. Well, by doing that, you no longer are admissible. You have to be an exception. So that could be an extremely talented student academically who's not admissible. So that's just another example I want to raise that happens occasionally. You will see up on the screen here, I won't spend much time on this. This is sort of our schedule of how we will go about conducting the audit plan. In the audit, the institutions will submit their data in January. We'll use January and February to pretty much scrub the data, clean it, edit it, and get it in a usable format. Then in March, the IR staff of the regions will conduct an assessment of the data and decide which ones should have been admitted by exception, and maybe a list of those who appears to us should have been admitted by exception but weren't flagged as such. Those records will be shared with the institution in advance of a site visit by the audit team headed up by Liz Bourgeois. During that site visit, they will review the records, give an opportunity for the schools to explain why that student was not admitted as an exception or was. And after that, then the audit team will prepare a report. That report will be shared with the campus for its final review and see if it has anything else it wishes to add. And then after that, final changes will be made, and that audit report will be brought to the board either in May or June, depending on how long it takes to take the audit. And following that, the board, based on the findings of the audit, the board will take whatever actions it decides it wishes to take at that point. But at that point, we will have final audited data with regard to those students admitted by regular admission and those admitted by exception. And Liz is here to answer any particular audit questions that's sort of beyond my scope.
So are there any, go ahead.
Do I understand then the institutions will submit a report? And if it's outside the bounds of the percentages, then at that point, our people would go and conduct an audit?
A little different. They'll submit their statewide student profile data to us, which is something they do every semester.
Yeah, they're already doing that?
Yeah.
All right.
That's due in January. By the time we get it cleaned and edited, let's say it's February. At that point, our staff will come up with 2 buckets. The students that the institution reported as admitted by exception, and those that the institution reported as regular admits, but we see something in the data that says maybe they should have been admitted as exceptions. Those lists will be shared with the campuses in advance of the audit visit, so the campus will be prepared when we show up to examine those records of the ones that seem a little suspect, that the campus is prepared to either defend the decision or explain the decision or admit that they made an error, whatever. And then from there, the audit staff will prepare the report, and then that report will go to the campus for its review, just to see if there's anything we may have missed or anything they want further clarification on or further explanation. And then a final report will be drafted for this board's consideration. I want to make sure
That is correct.
I get that
yes,
correct.
Sir, that's correct.
Did that answer your question?
Is this an all-new procedure?
What now?
Is this a brand-new procedure?
This is a brand new procedure for auditing for exceptions. We have SSPS audits, we have I think formula audits, there are a number of different audits. This is a new procedure to audit for exceptions, yes.
Any further questions? Yes, sir.
Dr. Tremblay, I know from our meeting earlier and the questions by Regent Markle, we have statistics going back that we can examine, right?
Yes, we examined the 2017 data to kind of get a handle on how many records were not reported as exceptions that we find suspect, questionable. And then when we found that, we came up with a number, and then we started looking deeper into the data we had for 17, and we found a number of students who should not have been reported as exceptions. I'm going to give you an example. If a student is not in the student transcript system, that would be any homeschooled student, it would be any out-of-state or international student. That means they can't have the core. Okay, we can't look at the core because they're not in student transcript system. And I'm trying to say this without using any acronyms. For those students, if they scored 3 points above the required ACT score, then they are regular admits. We're saying we can't judge about the core, but by your performance on ACT, you obviously have a well academic background. And we found a number of records where the students looked like they should have been by exceptions, but they had ACT scores of 3 above. So that'd be one example of it. We found a number of high school GPAs that were regular admits, but their high school GPAs were below 1. Well, we know that's an error because you cannot legally graduate from high school with a GPA below 1. So there are data errors. So one of the things that we're looking for, Regent Lipsey, is if the board were to adopt this plan today and the institutions are told in no uncertain terms, this is what we're going to do, and their records are due to us in January, that I'm assuming the records that come in January are going to be much cleaner than what we've looked at in the past.
Thank you. I think I understand that. I think.
I'm trying.
I look back. I think in those slides you showed us this morning, we adopted the new policy of the 4% exception for the flagship, 6% for the statewide, and 8% for the regionals in 2010. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
And
that is correct.
Did we examine in 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17?
No.
Did we examine the?
No, for 2
Is there a reason we didn't?
Well, I have 2 explanations. One is those were the GRAD Act years, and all the auditing and examinations were on the targeted measures that either institutions passed or failed GRAD Act. So our internal auditors as well as the performance auditors from the legislature, audited the targeted measures that were in GRAD Act. Plus, back then, statewide student profile system did not include all those fields that would help us make that determination.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good answer. I appreciate that. Dr. Tremblay, you've been around longer than anybody. You're the old guy. The old guy.
I don't know how to interpret that.
I'll
admit to it, but I don't know
I
how to
might
take
say
it.
we all love you and respect you.
Well, I'll believe
so
that.
There's no question about that. You're the go-to guy. Is the Board of Regents about improving education and making it more accessible in Louisiana?
Most certainly.
Good, thank you. Are we going to accept, just offhand, or condone announcements by universities that they're going to lower their standards and go to a different method other than as directed by the Board of Regents to accept their incoming freshmen?
Regent Lipsey, I have to assume the only pronouncements I have seen with any regard to admissions policies was by LSU. So I can only speak to that policy. LSU, prior to, I think, the full class next year, maybe part of the class this year, their requirement was the student had to have an ACT composite score of 22 and a high school core GPA of 3.0, okay? What I read in the paper was they were no longer requiring the ACT composite of 22. They would accept it, they would review it, but they weren't requiring it, and it didn't have to be part of their admissions. Under the Board of Regents admissions standards, LSU has to have either the ACT score of 25 or a GPA of 3.0. Since their standards required the 3.0, to date, I have interpreted their standards as they have changed their standards, but they have not gone below the Board of Regents minimum criteria, because the 3.0 is still required, and that's one of our either-or statements.
That's fair. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm asking Dr. Tremblay to answer some questions that now he's specifically has said point that, were changed by LSU. With your permission, is there anybody here from LSU, senior member from LSU, that could come to the table and perhaps answer a couple more questions that I have so that Dr. Tremblay doesn't have to interpret for LSU?
No. I don't think anybody's here.
There's nobody here from LSU? Dr. Good. Haney, would you come forward, maybe? I think everybody, I don't know that the board knows.
I understood Larry's comments, but in reference to your question, would you have him expand on the exceptions to that 25 3.0 rule, please?
I'm sorry.
When you say expand, what do you mean?
To expand on a description of the exceptions. You said the general rule is 25 and 3.0.
Or 3.0. Well,
that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay. And I'm not changing what anyone said.
Right.
And so what I'm asking is, would you ask him to expand on the exceptions to that rule?
Okay. I'm not sure. Regent Lipsey's
Can a student
question
be admitted
was,
by exception? I thought we talked about that all morning.
Regent Lipsey's
Yes.
question to me was, would I condone a pronouncement from an
I'm
institution?
not referring to his. I'm just asking, what are the exceptions, and can you explain them, please?
Me?
Yes.
The exceptions are 4% for the flagship, 6% for the statewide, and 8% for the regionals.
And what does an exception mean?
Exception means that they did not meet the Regent's minimum admissions criteria. There was something other than that.
And what's is there any criteria for the exception? Oh, could they have 0, 0?
We have a minimum requirement of a high school GPA of 2.0 for admission to any of our four-year institutions.
At 2.0, and what about an ACT score?
No.
So if someone has, the exception is someone has a 2.0 coming out of Bastrop High School, they can basically get into LSU as an exception.
Yeah.
Could get into any four-year university as an exception, that's correct.
Okay.
Could be admitted, if that's institutional choice within those boundaries, yes.
Let me ask a question another way, if I may. If a high school student from Chauvin, Louisiana has a 2.0, flunked math and English, might have been on the Student Government Association, might have, student council, might have been class president. Does this give LSU the ability to accept that kid under the exception?
That's a choice for LSU to.
That's what I'm saying, but they do have the choice to accept that person that might not excel in English or math, but yet is not really a bad student or bad person, works hard at everything else, but has trouble with that.
Right.
They have the ability to get that.
To get admitted under an exception.
Yes,
right.
Just as I just mentioned a few moments ago, if the student had a 30 ACT
Right.
and a 4.0 GPA, but took Spanish and French instead of 2 units of French, LSU's desire would be to admit that student
But
as an
let's talk
exception.
about English and math.
Yeah. We have no constraints on the exceptions.
Correct.
The exceptions are for the institution to use as it best sees for its campus and its students' body.
Let me ask you, how long has it been 22 or 3.0?
Oh,
So decades.
I think before 2005. I think it's before we adopted ours.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think.
All right.
And LSU, well, maybe Dr. Haney should sit at the table.
I think Larry's doing a great job.
And so.
That means everything, Larry.
I really prefer somebody from LSU answering the question. So what we're saying in essence is that somebody can flunk English or math. How is LSU, and that's where Dr. Haney, I'm sorry, I'm asking you, because I don't think Dr. Tremblay would know this. If somebody flunks English and math, but, a big contributor to LSU really wants to get that kid that flunked it from Monroe, from Shreveport into LSU, and LSU accepts him, how is LSU, since we don't do remediation anymore, how is LSU going to get him into classes that he doesn't bring down the ability of the other students to learn, because the teacher is going to have to focus on him to get, or her, to get them through English or math courses?
Right, so I think it's important to know that there are multiple options for students to satisfy the analytical reasoning in their general education curriculum. So some students may be going directly into an algebra class because they have a preparation for that, or they may go directly into calculus because they're able to go directly into calculus. For some students, it is still college level math, but they may go into, for example, you can satisfy the analytical reasoning through philosophy of logic course, and that course then can prepare you for the next level of math just prior to algebra. For that student who goes into our beginning college level math, we have tutors that are available to those students on a regular basis through our tutor center. We have substantial online support built into the class. And we also have supplemental instruction courses, sessions that are available. So the student will have the course, then there will be breakout, much smaller sessions that are available to that. So what we've done is to build in for every student who's taking those courses we know that can be challenging for students, because it may be they had all 4 math credits and they still weren't completely prepared for that course, despite the fact that you made it through, depending on the level and rigor of the course in the high school. So we want to ensure that the students are going into those courses have the ability to succeed. So we've surrounded them with substantial support in order for that student to be able to succeed.
First of all, for board members, I don't know whether you know it, Dr. Stacy Haney is the provost at LSU.
Interim provost now.
And a great one at that. And I'm embarrassed for her that LSU didn't think enough of the Board of Regents to send a senior staff person here to answer these questions instead of a faculty member. But Larry, let's go back to you to answer this question.
Excuse me, Mr. Lipset.
Yeah.
No disrespect, but aren't you a senior staffer?
Yes, I'm the executive vice president and interim provost, yes.
Yeah, I just want to make
well,
that clear for the record.
I made the comment because when I asked for a person from the senior, staff from LSU to come forward.
Well, I apologize for my
Dr. Haney
reluctance.
didn't come forward, and I was presuming that Dr. Haney is on the provost level, which all the deans report to, and that somebody maybe higher than Dr. Haney made the recent decision to open it up to holistic. And I'll get to that.
Again, I don't mean in any kind of disrespect.
No, I totally agree. Dr. Haney is a blessing to LSU. Larry, back to you. How will we, the Board of Regents, protect ULL, Louisiana Tech, Southeastern, Nichols, McNeese, Grambling, and so many others, and especially right here in Baton Rouge, Southern University? How are we going to protect those colleges and universities so that we're not, by lowering LSU's standards, us allowing LSU to lower their standards? How are we going to protect those schools? How are we going to look in 3 or 4 years when we've taken their best students? And how are their ACT and GPAs going to look? And what are they going to have to do to retain their students and protect them from what LSU has just done without asking the Board of Regents or their own Board of Supervisors?
Can I just ask a quick question? I'm just want to add, let me let you answer the point, but when LSU said we're not requiring a 22, right?
Or an ACT score.
ACT score at all. We're not requiring that, but they have to have a 3.0. So they said either or they just pulled out the...
We've not pulled out the ACT. What we will do is consider the ACT. We will consider their GPA. We will consider a letter of recommendation. We will consider the rigor of their high school curriculum. All of that will have to be in their application file.
Gotcha.
But you are, I mean, it said that they were using the or provision that was written.
Well, that's always been available, and as Larry said,
so
we're continuing to do that.
Not to, I don't know how to ask this question because I certainly don't want to hurt any high school in the state, but is a 3.0 at Lake Providence High the same as a 3.0 at Episcopal here in Baton Rouge?
I empirically would not be able to say that. I could give you that answer. Certainly in terms of the way the regents have developed that criteria, the answer is yes.
Okay, back to you, Dr. Tremblay, to answer my last question.
And again, we've known each other quite a while. I will answer the question, but not from the perspective of LSU lowering, because I don't know that yet. I depend on the data, and every time I'm asked a question, you know, I have to say to the commissioner sometimes, this isn't really based on data, these are my thoughts, but these kinds of decisions are based on data. They're going to be driven by data. So from what I've read, LSU has removed the requirement of this and that, but that does not drop them below our requirements, nor does it necessarily mean it's lowered. It's changed, but not necessarily lowered. But having said that, in my opinion, the second part of your question, in terms of protecting our universities, you know, we've asked institutions to give us some preliminary numbers. And again, they're preliminary. But the numbers are showing that a number of our four-year universities have record classes this year. Their freshman classes are the highest ever. So I don't see a question of LSU stealing someone else's students any more than that argument's been made for the last 50 years that, you know, you're milking, you're taking my best and the brightest and all that, but that's part of the role of the flagship, so I don't dispute that. But I don't see any evidence right now that, you know, if LSU said enrollment's up by 5,000 and our other four-year institutions were down by 5,000, I go, I wonder what that means. But I'm not seeing that based on preliminary data. So that,
Larry, do we have record graduations also? I mean, we can say 1 million gets into our colleges if we only have one graduate. Of what value is that to us?
right.
So I think you got to concentrate on not, and we're letting in this number, let's face it, because of the money. All right? So we let 1 million people in and we graduate one. Okay?
Right.
Why are we not tracking the number of people we graduate and what we do with them?
Well, we do
I think
track.
we do track that.
Are they record numbers?
We do, yeah, I think LSU's graduating class last May, and I think statewide we had the largest graduating numbers.
Okay,
So-
well,
so
would you not
should-
agree that that's the most important number?
It's certainly
He didn't-
an important number.
And that, I guess my question is, we've taken years and years and years by living by higher standards at LSU and raising the standards. And Dr. Alexander or LSU made a great point. It was kind of coincidental that they had a full-page ad in yesterday's paper, you know, headline, record-breaking class of 21, and then they showed the 5,800 students with a 3.5 and a 26 ACT. Best we've ever had. So why, then, I guess that goes back to you then, Dr. Haney, why are we going to this new method, and why, when LSU has been so successful, why are we changing in the middle of the stream?
Well, first of all, I think under no circumstances should this be considered that LSU has lowered standards. I think what LSU is doing is looking at what research tells us about, and this goes back to the question about success, what factors best predict a student's success at an institution, and relying solely on 2 of those, particularly as a cut point, either or cut point, and ignoring multiple other factors that can help us to determine the likelihood of a student coming to LSU and succeeding, graduating, going on to the great careers that our alumni experience. If we can bring more information to bear, that's a better thing to do. So looking at a student much more comprehensively is what was done in last year's class. And I think the key is to assess how successful those students are going to be at LSU.
Well, Dr. Haney, that's kind of contradictory of the facts. The fact is that every year LSU has improved under its core curriculum and standards. So why are we changing it? Again, I ask that question because we've been successful every single year. We are getting better.
Well, I think that...
And what is the predictor that by lowering standards or taking the iffy students, what did LSU, and I guess I had a question here with my next question, did the LSU admission standards and the Honors College Faculty Committee that examines this, do they have some good statisticians on board, and have they gone through the analysis of the impact of holistic admissions on LSU as well as the other colleges in our state?
I can't speak for the other colleges of the state. Certainly when our faculty brought the idea of looking more comprehensively to our Academic Standards and Honors Committee, they did present that information to them. This was done some time ago, and that was approved and certainly reaffirmed by our Faculty Senate.
Mr. Chairman, I just need to try to understand, generally speaking, and when I get to a point you disagree, let me know, okay? The Board of Regents standards is a 25 ACT or 3.0 GPA, is that correct?
As I understand it.
Okay, now, LSU standard today is a 22 in the ACT and a 3.0, correct? Or 3.0?
It was the and considered for the student, yes.
Okay, so there's been a reduction from 25 to 22, is that fair to say?
Well, we had never adopted.
It was always a 22.
It has always been that
I'm
way.
just
That
saying,
has not changed.
we're 25 and LSU's 22, right?
Right, except LSU is 22 and a 3.0.
Okay.
Ours is 25 or 3.0, so LSU decided we're going to use the 3.0.
That's right.
So LSU's not using our standards?
Well, they are.
They're not using our
It's the
standards?
institution's decision whether they use an ACT or a
It's
high
a
school
simple question.
GPA.
They're not using our standards? Yes or no?
I think they are.
I think they are.
I think they are.
Okay, so they're using 25 and, or 3.0?
Correct.
Is that right?
And the core.
Correct.
Okay, in the core curriculum?
Correct.
But the 25 and 3.0 was general, correct? Or is it the core curriculum?
It's 25
Or
ACT or 3.0 on the core.
And that's our criteria?
That's our criteria.
And that's what they're
And-
using.
And they
LSU's
are
using
saying
the
that they
same-
are using the 3.0 core GPA and not using the 22 ACT or the
Okay.
25.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes,
They're
sir,
not
that's
using
it.
the 22, or they're not using the 25.
Correct. And the way we presented.
It's hard to get there, but that's what I'm trying to get.
Well, let me suggest, this is, obviously the question of the day. Admission standards
Wait,
generally.
Mr. Chairman, I hadn't finished.
Oh,
Let
I'm
me
sorry.
finish,
I'm
okay?
sorry. I thought I
And
answered
so,
the question.
we've established those numbers, okay? Now, what I need to know is on the exception side, okay? Now, LSU gets 4% of exceptions, which means from what Larry just explained to me, that you have to have a 2.0 GPA, correct?
At a minimum.
At least, on the exceptions.
I
believe you have to have a 2.0 to graduate from high school.
High school.
So
Okay.
you're gonna
Can
have-
can you enter LSU without graduating from a high school?
No.
No. Okay. So you have to have at least a 2.0 GPA under the exceptions, correct?
Just to be admitted, if
To be
you were
admitted.
going to be on an exception side.
Okay. Now,
By your
so
definition.
a student from XYZ High School that has a 2.0, has flunked math and has flunked English, can get into LSU with an exception. Is that correct?
Yes.
By your standard.
Oh, no. by
Under
LSU
the
standards.
exception by your standard, that doesn't necessarily mean we would allow them into LSU.
But what do the standards say?
By the, as I understand that, Larry would certainly be better to articulate the Regent standards, but by the Regent standards, if we had a student who fell into that category and there was some other exceptional talent or some other indicator that LSU felt that this student could have success for whatever reason, and we're speaking very hypothetically here, and that student had a 2.0 under your scenario, then that student could theoretically be admitted under the exception rule.
So you and I agree. So that's what is called the holistic approach, correct?
which we have always looked beyond
And
just
so
those two
that
things.
student that we're talking about, if he gets a letter from a senator or a governor or something like that, says this guy's exceptional, we want him in LSU, LSU could possibly take him.
Potentially, looking at the whole of that student, not
I think
necessarily
anyone-
a letter
anyone
from a
could.
senator as a
So
deciding
I guess,
factor.
I think I understand now. So under certain circumstances, from a holistic standpoint, from a subjective standpoint, not an objective standpoint, we could let someone in with a 2.0 that's flunked math and English.
That's not going to happen.
Well, let me try to clarify and maybe be helpful here. In 2001, the Board of Regents adopted admission standards, minimum standards to be implemented in 05. It included exceptions. Our process has always included exceptions. So we look at what is happening across the state for our students. Currently, it's 4, 6, and 8. So we have said, I think the Board of Regents in 2001 said, we think students are more than numbers. The numbers matter in terms of academic preparation, but there should be an opportunity for every institution to look at students who we think have the ability to benefit beyond the numbers. And so that is why exceptions have been part of our process from the beginning, almost 18 years. We will celebrate next week or two the 20th anniversary of the community college system, which allowed the Board of Regents to step into the process of moving from open admissions to having admission standards. So as we look at this, I think your comment, Regent Markle, is an important one. We need to know how the standards are working. We need to know, are students being successful? We need to know that institutions that are accepting students, by exception or not, are fully committed to their success, and we want to make sure they're doing well. So I want to make sure that we have that context. We talked a bit about that today. But this idea of a holistic review, a review beyond ACT, GPA, and core, is nested in what the Board of Regents adopted in 2001 to implement in 2005. That's my reading of what we have done and the history of what we have been pursuing as we move forward. So our conversation today is to say we want to audit as step one in a process to make sure Regents' policies are being followed, and then Regents as a board can have a policy conversation around, is this the right number? Are the outcomes correct? Are students being supported? And is there more we need to do? So this is obviously an important conversation, but it's step one in a broader conversation around what we do and what we're committed to do. Regent Ewing's comment, are we committed, or Regent Lipsey's comment, are we committed to student success? Are we committed to talent development? Yes, we are. And so we need to make sure we have good data and good information, that we are receiving from you all the questions you want answered, so that we can address with accuracy and confidence that we are stepping forward in our work appropriately. So I just wanted to make sure to share that information.
Chairman Temple, may I?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I think the conversation has been good. It seems to me that there is a little bit lack of comfort. Do we have a motion on the floor at this time to adopt this? We do not, do we?
No.
We need a motion.
We need a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we defer until our October meeting action on this proposal, and let the questions that Regent Lispey asked be submitted to us from LSU, and we get ourselves in a better position and a greater level of comfort. Now, if I can get a second on this motion, I'll be glad to explain.
I second
So,
Can I make?
There's a second here.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
This is just an observation. First a point and then an observation. The point is, when the board established admissions criteria back in 2001, the board understood that there's great value in holistic admissions. I'm not talking about LSU now. I'm talking about the concept of holistic admissions. You have students that get sick. You have family matters. You have all kinds of reasons why students don't quite hit those marks. And you want to be able to take them into consideration. The Regents, since it involved that culture change I was talking about, we couldn't say, okay, we're going to have admissions criteria, and it's going to involve all these 8 18 different things you need to look at. We said, no, let's get to some of the basic things. And that's what we adopted. We never adopted with the idea, this is the total value of a student. So I just want to say that. An observation about your recommendation, Regent Ewing, is that I personally, this audit plan, and going forward with that, is necessary regardless of what the questions are, and critical to be able to answer whatever those questions are. So I think we can certainly continue the conversation and all that, but having the audit plan, I think, is critical and doesn't require any delay in answering any questions. We all know we have a lot of questions, and only through the audit plan can we start answering the questions.
I appreciate your opinion.
Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor that's been
Mr.
seconded.
Chairman, I'd like to talk to it. I'm going to speak against the continuance simply because of what Larry said, and I think the motion on the floor now is to continue this process. It's 2018, and we have no idea how good our students are doing. We have no idea. Shame on us. This is an opportunity for us to move forward today, not next week, not next month, not next year. There's no reason to kick this can down the road. We have an opportunity now to find out for the people of this state how well we've been doing. Now, are we scared to do that? Are we afraid to find out how well we've been doing? If we are, shame on us again. Now's the time, as Larry just said, to find out what the true facts are. Let's get to the truth. This isn't about implementing a new policy. This is about trying to find out where we are, how well we've been doing, and with the gathering of that information, what we need to do as the grown-ups in the room to make our education better. So I would ask my colleagues not to continue this, but to seek out and obtain the data that we need to do our job correctly.
Regent.
So I just have a, so what you're saying is to move forward with the audit?
Yes.
Correct, okay.
Well, there's a motion to continue.
Regent Markle, you're exactly right. I apologize, and Regent Ewing, I apologize. I withdraw my second. Regent Markle is absolutely correct with that, but I think another motion would be in order that and a few more questions that I'm going to ask, and maybe others that, like Regent Markle have asked, that we do have a motion that those questions be answered.
I seconded
and I
the
have
motion.
We need the answer to those questions, but Regent Markle is absolutely correct. Let's don't put off letting the Board of Regents move forward with the audit and trying to find these statistics.
If you will look at the timetable, it would not be putting off. Nothing really starts until January.
Well,
all I'm saying is, and I may be the only one, I have a level that lacks comfort on what I know about this. I think that we are on new ground insofar as what we are asking the universities to do. Quite honestly, I think they've probably been submitting that anyway. We've heard information, Regent Markle, all day long about the 4.6%, the different universities. It's not that there's a whole lot more we're going to learn. I'm just saying, and I do have a motion on the table and it's seconded. I don't want to cut off discussion, but there's not a lot of question. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call for questions.
Say it again.
I did withdraw my
I had seconded.
All right, so Regent
I call the
Perez
question.
second.
I call the question.
Okay, question called.
Yeah, I'm voting against.
Go ahead.
You guys call the roll of the committee members.
So if I understand, the motion is to
Yeah,
defer this
and
action.
this is by a vote by the committee members.
Okay.
And so if you're not a committee member, do not vote.
Who's on the
So,
committee?
Do you need to restate the motion, Mr. Chair?
yes, go ahead, restate it.
The motion was to defer action on this proposal until the October meeting, at which time we would hope to have secured good factual information presented by particularly LSU in a written form for us to review. We will be in a setting in October, as you know, when we can have a good talk about this, a good exchange, and then in our meeting, we can deal with this. That is the motion. I believe that I do have a second on that. Question has been called, and I think that calls for a cease of discussion.
Call the roll, and then we take a vote.
I'll call the roll, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
All right, so we have Chair Temple?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, is he voting or just acknowledging his presence?
Are you voting for?
I thought you were voting on
Roll
the side.
call vote.
Motion.
We're voting for.
Roll call.
No,
To put it off a month.
Yeah, go ahead. No. I want to.
All right, so your vote
No.
to defer till October is no.
Okay.
All right. Make sure everybody knows what they're, all right, let's see, Debbie's left. All right, Regent Ewing,
Yes.
Regent McDonald,
No.
Regent Perez.
Yes.
Yes. Regent Tennyson.
No.
No. So there are 2 noes, 3 noes, and 2 yeses. So the vote fails.
I'd like to continue my questions.
So I want to make sure I captured the second part of the conversation, which I think is an important one, which is there are many questions that we still have. So I do want to make sure that whether that is a motion or whether that is a commitment on behalf of the staff, we certainly want to make sure that we're providing you all the information you need to move forward.
Mr. Chairman?
Do we have to have a motion to adopt the staff's recommendation?
Okay, so can we adopt that? Can I get a motion, first of all? McDonald, Regent McDonald, second. Second.
Who moved?
And
Second. Okay.
Question.
Hold it. McDonald moved?
Yes.
I made the
Donald
motion. Yeah.
And Tennyson second?
Tennyson
Okay.
second.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question, can we continue questioning? Should there be continued questioning before the vote, or is it after the vote we can continue questioning?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I know
Right.
Regent Lipsey, we all, there's been a lot of questions generated in our meeting upstairs in today. So what I would like, and as our commissioners pointed out, let's have a consensus that we want to get a lot of questions answered. A number of people have questions about admission requirements across the state, not just LSU, other universities also. What are we doing? Are we exceeding the 4%? Or how far are we exceeding 6% or 8%? Or maybe some universities only at 2%. We sort of need to get the total picture, and then as Regent Lipsey has pointed out too, we'd sort of like to know those students that are being taken from certain schools that really have a weak academic program, that are they getting in, and how they're doing, and how many of these are we taking in our universities. I co-authored our community college system, and we created that so that we had an avenue for our students to move on into post-secondary education. You stay a year, you can transfer
Right.
to a four-year university.
And so, gentlemen, not to
I
cut everything, but because we've already had the question, we really at this point are supposed to be moving on.
Well, I have another question. Are we, just one
So I
more
wanna move
question,
on.
are we closing discussion on this? Are we open to more discussion?
Well, all right, excuse me, what I'm proposing, if I need to make a motion, I will. Well, we're gonna have an October meeting, we're gonna have 3 days, 4 days, a month.
A retreat.
Down there with Marty. I think we're gonna have plenty of time, and if we need to bring people there for the meeting to answer our questions, we need to do so. If we wanna wait and maybe come up with a consensus of questions while we're at this retreat in the Thibodeau area, and come back in November here in Baton Rouge and bring these people forward, staff from the different schools, and answer all the questions that the regents have, so that we can be comfortable that if we pass policy, that the policy is being implemented at the universities, and that's what Dr. Tremblay and his staff is going to be doing the next few months. We're going to have an audit, and we're going to get audit findings, and we're going to find out that what we're proposed is being followed. If it's not, what we can do is we can withhold a lot of money or something, you know, we might $10,000 or something. And but anyway, and if I need to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, I will. But I just make a suggestion, ask the board if they would consider that we pool our questions, get them to the commissioner, the chairman, Levy, and let's get some consolidated questions, and let's get answers to them, and then we can distribute them, or we can hear them as a board. And cause I guarantee you, we could be here till 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman,
because we have a lot of questions.
One more question, please. I have just one more question first, and a little statement with it, and that is, Dr. Reed, you brought an excellent point out there a few minutes ago about our 20th anniversary of our community colleges. They are doing damn good. And we're so proud of what we established and what these community colleges are doing. It's very, very important to the state. And I fear what's happening now will make them deteriorate. But Dr. Haney, I have one last question for you. I know, other than LSU wanting, quote, about 1,000 more students over the next few years, 1,000 students in terms of money means $12 million to LSU. My question to you, other than that, is looking at this report that came from the university, my question is to you, why? Why are we adopting this? Why is LSU adopting this new holistic approach?
Mr. Chairman, no disrespect meant here whatsoever, but would it be appropriate for me to call the question on the subject matter, especially out of deference to the LSU representative who has not been prepared to answer these questions
excuse me,
specific to this subject matter, was not notified in advance that these questions were going to be coming to this extent and in this detail. Just out of respect for the proper information to be received by the group, I call the question and move for a vote.
Regent Perez, I respect you, but I totally disagree with your reasoning there. If
I
the
don't believe the
provost
call
of the
for the question
university
is
is here,
debatable.
who sat on the committee, and they cannot answer the question, why?
The question's called, do I have a motion? I don't need a motion.
Yeah, we need a motion. I believe that we move forward
To adopt
and
the
we
staff
adopt
the staff recommendation.
Yeah, the staff, senior staff recommendation. And once we do that, we can move forward with the audit, and that's what we want. Then that doesn't resolve all these other issues, but I move that we do that.
That motion's been made, it was seconded. I think she has called for the question. Vote.
Moved to second by Regent Tennyson.
Do it by a voice vote again, please, Larry. I mean, a individual vote.
Want a roll call vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Chair Temple?
Yes.
Regent Ewing?
Did you read what was the proposal? I couldn't hear it.
I'm sorry. The recommendation is to approve the proposed first-time freshman admissions audit plan.
No.
All right. Regent McDonald?
Yes.
Regent Perez?
Yes.
Regent Tennyson?
Yes.
So the recommendation is approved.
Okay. Okay.
Other business.
Is that it? Okay. Is there any other business?
I do have a question. Are you saying there are no more comments from the Board of Regents?
We could take them up during the board meeting.
I'm sorry?
We could take it up during the board meeting, which follows immediately this.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, there are two items under other business. I'll do what the committee's wish. First is a very short informational item, and that is you may have read in the paper about Virginia College closing. They have campuses in Baton Rouge and Shreveport. It's part of a wider nationwide move by the owner of Virginia College. They're closing, I think, 34 campuses nationwide, 2 of them in Baton Rouge. Accreditation issues and enrollment issues. They weren't money makers. So they have a good teach-out plan. Hopefully no students will be left held in the bag. We've had other campuses step up to say if students have not completed in time, they'd be more than happy to enroll those students. And Virginia College has even offered to refund tuition for students who have not completed by the closure, which is next July. There are no questions on that. The next item, and I could delay this till next month if you'd like, Regent Markle had made a request for a report on online education. I was prepared to make that, but if the chair wishes...
Let's move it to next month.
Okay. All right. Okay, then there's no other business.
Okay. So here, I now move that we adjourn. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Okay, this concludes the committee meetings. We will be moving on to our board. We'll take a literally 5-minute break, and we will finish up with our board
Thanks,
meeting
Larry, for deferring that.
in 5 minutes.
Larry, thanks for deferring that to the next meeting.
To order and ask for a roll call, Carolyn.
Regent Adley is absent. Regent Chabert.
Here.
Regent David is absent. Regent Ewing.
Here.
Regent Kenny is absent. Regent Levy.
Here.
Regent Lipsy.
Here.
Regent Markle.
Here.
Regent McDonald.
Here.
Regent Meyer is absent. Regent Perez.
Here.
Regent Pryor is absent. Regent Seal.
Here.
Regent Temple is absent. Regent Tennyson.
Present.
Regent Wyatt is absent. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is if request for public comments. Has there been any such request?
No, sir.
All right, if not, we'll go on to the next agenda item is approval of the minutes of the August 22nd, 2018.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any opposition to approving those minutes? Hearing none, those motion is passed. Next, we're going to skip these comments for the chairman and move into the committee reports. At this time, we can take up all of the committee reports or in Globo, or we can take up all of the committee reports in Globo, less and accept the PRP committee report.
Mr. Chairman, I move that they be accepted in Globo.
There's a motion to accept all of the reports in Globo. There's a second.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Richard, that means in Globo.
I have one question.
Question?
Could I ask just one last question of Provost Haney?
Then let's do this. Let's take in Globo. Can we amend the motion, Mr. Markle, to take in everything but PRP's report?
You bet.
Is there a second to that amended
Second.
motion? Is there any opposition to that amended motion? Then we will adopt all of the committee reports, less and accept the PRP report. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, that motion passes. Do we now take up PRP? And Dr. Tremblay, if you would come forward. Dr. Tremblay, your committee submitted and was adopted at committee the exception audit protocol. Do you wish to make any final concluding statements?
The only observation I would make is that, again, I'm sort of repeating myself, but the same observation I made to Regent Ewing earlier is that this audit plan is critical. It's designed to answer hopefully whatever questions this board has. Right. And so adopting the audit plan should not be impacted by any particular question coming out of that recommendation, but that's just my observation.
Would you say that the adoption of the audit plan would be a condition precedent to making any policy changes concerning admissions criteria?
I would hope that this board would not want to make a policy change without seeing the appropriate data.
Developed through the audit?
Correct.
All right. So it will not impede in any way our discussions going forward on all ranges concerning admissions criteria?
Not at all, and we'll send a message to the campuses about the seriousness of the matter.
That's correct. Okay. Regent Lipsey, do you have a question?
Just one question for Dr. Haney.
You earning that provost salary today?
She's earning her money. Just one last question, and there will be dozens more, I'm sure, that will come forth from our retreat. But I just, for the record, I've not seen anything from my university, LSU, you know, seeing all the great reports and everything, that why is LSU doing this?
First of all, thank you for. Thank you for your advocacy on behalf of higher education. We certainly agree that we want to focus on ensuring that every student who has the ability to succeed at LSU is able to come to our campus. And I think the adoption of more comprehensively evaluating a student, now setting aside the Regents adopted expectations for our own expectations on our campus, to simply limit them to 2 factors, an ACT and a GPA. And while we comprehensively looked at students this year, we did a much deeper dive than we had in the past. I don't know that we did anything substantially different than we've done in the past. We just took more time to look at every single student and to ensure that we felt confident that student could succeed at our institution. And if you ask why we did that, I think we don't want to limit a student who wants to come to LSU, wants to graduate with us, and has the ability to do that. We don't want to arbitrarily suggest that the student won't have an opportunity at our campus. And I do want to say that we have had tremendous success this year. The quality of this class has not changed, and we now have more students who will have the opportunity to come to LSU and to succeed on our campus as a result of looking more comprehensively and evaluating, again, basing the approach to admissions to research that tells us these are the predictors, not eliminating the ones we've already and always have used, but looking much more comprehensively. I think the students deserve that.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. And so I just presume then that LSU will follow Board of Regents' policy of the 4% exception.
Well, we will report as required by your...
Right. I mean, you know, we have the 4% exception rule, and my presumption is you're not going to do what LSU did in the past, and you're going to take the OR provision, which I understand, perfectly legal, but that LSU will maintain the 4% exception rule as as the Board of Regents has dictated.
Well, I think we would see every student admitted to LSU as a student who's capable of succeeding. We aren't going to admit a student into our campus whom we think doesn't.
You're going to admit 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% and just disregard our policy?
Well, I think, again, when you're looking at the number of the number of applications that LSU has,
yeah,
and you're looking at this side of the funnel, and we, again, I want to be very clear that we are admitting the students we think will succeed. Now, whether they are going to fall under an exception and meet some percentage cap that's set there, we'll be reporting that to you, and I'm sure there will be conversations about that.
So you made the decision without coming to the Board of Regents or the Board of Supervisors. It was just made by senior staff then to go to this new method and don't worry about what the Board of Regents policy is. Is that correct?
Well, no, I don't think that's correct.
Well,
no,
my question was just simply, are you going to follow Board of Regents policy?
We will certainly report to the regents.
No, I guess my question just is a yes or no. Are you going to, is LSU going to follow Board of Regents? Holistic, you can holistic all of them, that 4% as far as I'm concerned. You can holistic all of them. I'm just asking, is LSU going to follow the Board of Regents policy?
Well, certainly LSU has an expectation of a 3.0 GPA, which is going to follow within the regents.
Then that's not an exception.
Yeah, excuse me?
3.0, it means that it's not an exception.
Correct.
It's a regular admit.
Correct.
Has your board taken a position on this?
Our board is having conversations, certainly, about this. We have an upcoming meeting.
Okay.
There's not been a vote by the LSU system on this, has there not? Is that correct?
I don't believe that's happened within the last year.
Okay, that answers it. Is there any other I'm sorry.
I just want to thank Dr. Haney. I appreciate you coming and having to represent LSU. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
It's a privilege.
All right, there's a question called concerning the motion submitted by the staff to approve the audit, as was done in the committee earlier, to approve the audit protocol. Do we have a second to, or make a motion? Do we have a second? You have a second, Ed?
Yes.
Is there any opposition? That motion passes. We have adopted that committee report. Thank you, Provost. All right, Dr. Reed is the next up, the Commissioner's report.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regents. Delighted to have a great day of conversation with you and a great day yesterday. I am enjoying the opportunity in this new role to visit our campuses. I've visited 16 campuses in the 3 months on the job. Certainly you can't do good policy from Baton Rouge. You've got to walk the campuses and talk to presidents and students and business leaders and legislators. And I thank Dr. Crane, who was here the last visit I had. Part of our Hazing Prevention Week was on his campus, so I thank him for hosting my last visit. Also had the opportunity to visit with Senator Cassidy in Washington, D.C. He is a member of the Senate Help Committee, which will have the authority to oversee the reauthorization of higher education, and so we had a good conversation as well. We've been hard at work on a number of convenings, and the power to convene is an important one for the Board of Regents. So I want to highlight quickly 4 activities that we have had. We've convened over 800 stakeholders in the last month on a number of initiatives. The first one is the LaSTEM initiative, focused on science, technology, engineering, and math. The conference was held at the Pennington Center. We had several hundred people who were there for the conversation on trying to ensure that we are developing a strong STEM initiative. Over 500 individuals, lots of kids who are coding, lots of folks in robotics. Senator Sharon Hewitt, as you know, co-chairs LaSTEM, which sits at the Board of Regents. The governor was on hand, and I thank Regent Markle also for being there with us to share in the excitement of our focus on trying to spread the word on the importance of STEM and STEM education and STEM jobs and women in STEM, and on it goes. The next week, we had a convening of a Lewis Users Conference, and Terry Galloway and her team convened 200 librarians to have a conversation around OER and e-textbooks and affordability and a number of things. And my one interesting point from there is I bound up onto the stage, and I see someone here from the conference. I bound up on the stage and I said, "Good morning." And I got this very quiet, good morning. And I said, oh, librarians, that's right. That's right, that's right. So I get it. I forgot that the librarians value silence. But it was a great conversation, and I appreciate the work that is happening. You know, the Lewis Executive Board is focused on their strategic plan, developing that, and it'll be coming to their executive board and then to you, focused on affordability. The next conversation we had was the HBCU Advisory Council, another council that sits in the Board of Regents, formed by Senator Wesley Bishop. He was the author of the legislation, requires us to really focus on the public and private institutions, our HBCUs, to try to build capacity. And so we had our first meeting. The mayor of New Orleans was there to express her support. UMA was there to swear us in. We heard from Economic Development and Workforce around rules of engagement and how do you partner with them to be a part of the recruitment of new jobs and the expansion of jobs. And so we're excited about that. And we were one of 3 states highlighted by the White House HBCU initiative at their conference, states that are stepping into HBCU work. And then finally, the accolades are still coming in from the Funding Formula Summit. As you know, it's important that we have full transparency in the summit, in the formula rather, and thanks to Regent Chabert, who was there for that conversation. We had every campus represented, and we had academic officers as well as finance officers learning more about all of the variables in the formula. And then the staff, Terrence and the team, had a worksheet for every campus to identify how they can improve in the formula. So we want to make sure there's not a secret black box around the formula, that people understand how it works. And we heard a lot of good information. Tristan Denley was there in the bottom right corner. He has done some phenomenal transformational work around math pathways in Georgia and Tennessee, and so he was there from the academic side, from a provost, to speak to the academic officers specifically about how to move your student success forward, and so we'll be having conversations about that. Finally, as I mentioned, it's National Hazing Prevention Week. We had a great roundtable conversation with students at Southeastern. Again, Regent Ewing, we have the responsibility to adopt, as you know, the hazing policy. The campuses have the responsibility to implement. And so I wanted to make sure on behalf of the board that we are hearing directly from students. Are you aware? Are you being trained? Do you have good information? And so we had the SGA students and the quarterback of the football team, members of the choir, fraternities, sororities, all there to talk about how do we prevent hazing and how do we ensure that students understand their responsibility to help us to spread the message that hazing is not to be permitted. It is a felony and lives can be lost. So we had a great conversation there. We took pages and pages of notes. Dr. Crane's team took pages and pages of notes. The students, as always, have great suggestions and ideas. And so we will be moving those forward. Finally, I just wanted to mention that we had an outstanding staff retreat. The feedback has been good. It will help us to continue to shape our good work. And then we're looking forward certainly to our board retreat. And the strong engagement of this board is critical to the policy work that we do to make sure we have it right on behalf of our students and our state. So again, I am very much appreciative of the opportunity, and that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Under other business, I will tell you again the dates for the retreats you just mentioned are the 22nd, which we will meet in Thibodaux and go to Fletcher and visit there, and then the retreat will be in Thibodaux at Nichols all day on the 23rd, and then we will have our board meeting on the 24th, which is Wednesday. If there is no other business to come.
Mr. Chairman, I have one comment.
Yes, sir.
For the retreat, I wonder if you could add to the list a discussion on whether we can change the law on letting loose the data, releasing the data, the historical data on our students in a confidential way so that we can look at it and see what we need to do in order to complete our job properly.
I will ask UMA if she would get that information, assemble a position paper for us to have the legal aspects so that we can decide where to go and what to recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other business? We stand adjourned. Thank you.